Welcome back to the Bump and Stacy Show. Today we are joined by Tim Kurkjian, ESPN analyst. Been watching you for a long time, Tim, and thanks for joining us, man. How you doing?
I'm well. Everything's good. Great baseball season so far.
My lovely co-host is here as well, Stacey Ross, but I'll get the party going, man. Tough couple of games for the Seattle Mariners. You got 10 runs dropped on you 2 games in a row, and we kind of felt like this was going to be a measuring stick for this team going up against the Yankees. You have a good series against the A's, then you elevate a little bit against the Pirates, and the Yankees come out and just dominate. Am I right by looking at this series and saying, okay, if we don't see a couple of things we need to see, I should be worried about the Mariners, meaning pitching continue to be well, and then the bats getting going. We haven't had the bats getting going. How do I look at this series, Tim?
I think it's a little too early to worry. The Yankees, by the way, are really good right now, and Aaron Judge is swinging it better than he has all year, which is really saying something. I wouldn't worry too much about the Mariners. I like their team. You're right. They're going to have to hit better than 230 if they're going to make it to the playoffs this year. I think the biggest concern for the Mariners is that the Rangers are really good. In the same division, they are 15 games over 500 and have outscored their opponents by 128 runs. So that's another element, a new dynamic that you add to the American League playoff situation, especially in the AL West. The Rangers are good. They're for real. They're not going away. So the Mariners are going to have to play a whole lot better if they're going to make the playoffs, but I think they're capable of it. Their pitching is really good. They're just going to have to find a way to score a few more runs.
How did the Rangers get to this point? Because, Tim, I got to be honest, I feel like we're used to watching them try and fail over and over. I mean, I'm saying that as a Mariners fan, mind you. But, what do you see as their path to doing this year what they're doing?
Well, they made 3 major moves. Last year, they signed Marcus Semien and Corey Seager, which gives them a great 1-2 punch at the top of the order and one of the best double play combinations in the major leagues. And both guys are high character, really competitive guys. That's where it all started. Then in the offseason, they went and improved their starting pitching, signing Nate Eovaldi, who's had a great year. And, of course, Jacob deGrom, who is a dominant pitcher, still maybe the best in the game if they can ever get him out on the mound. He's been hurt an awful lot. So their starting pitching is now really good. They have the lowest starting pitcher ERA in the American League. That's impossible to believe, say, 2 years ago. And then the third thing they did, of course, was they hired Bruce Bochy to manage the team. He will be a first-ballot Hall of Famer. He's won 3 championships with the Giants. And I promise you, the minute he walked in that door, everything changed with the Rangers. And most important, Chris Young, the general manager, told him, Boch, we want you to manage the team your way. A lot of managers don't get that kind of leeway in today's day and age. The front office kind of runs the managerial job, not in Texas. So Bruce Bochy, improved offense, improved pitching, that makes the Rangers for real.
Tim, what do you think about the core of this team? We're talking Julio Rodriguez, Jared Kelenic, you throw France in there, Cal Raleigh. Do you like the foundation of this organization?
I do. Julio Rodriguez is a great player already, and I know he's only hitting 240 or so, but he's a guy you build around because talk about high character guys. My goodness, they don't come any better than him as far as doing the right thing and being prepared for everything. But again, they're going to have to score more runs. Remember, they made the playoffs last year with an exceptionally low batting average, and they're hitting 230 right now. That's going to have to change, and they're going to have to find a way to score more runs. Kelnic's going to have to be this good, even better as the season goes along. Ty France is going to have to hit more. Everyone's going to have to hit more in that lineup because, again, the Astros have tremendous pitching. We just talked about the Rangers, how good they are. The Angels are much better than they were last year. So the Mariners have their hands full making the playoffs, but it would really help if the core guys you talked about would start to hit a little bit more.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm already thinking of a couple examples, but what are some of your personal favorite examples of teams that started off not quite meeting expectations and then kind of ended up meeting or surpassing them as the season went on?
Well, all you have to do is go back to the 2019 Washington Nationals.
Yeah.
They were 19-30. They were 11 games under 500, and they came back and won the World Series. You look at the Braves in 2021, the year they won the World Series. They didn't get to 500 until early August that year, and they won the World Series. So this beautiful game is littered with teams that don't look so good for 2 months, 3 months, and then turn it on. Just like this game is also littered with teams that start off like a house fire and then just crumble down the stretch. The obvious idea is to try to be as good as you can for the whole year. The Mariners have some work to do, but they proved to me last year they have something special on that team. They just have to make sure it comes out again this year.
I don't know if you how deep you are with the Mariners organization, but they find a way to develop these young arms. What do you see? Is there a characteristic that you see in all these pitchers? Is there a method to their madness? How they've been able to discover these arms and develop them?
Well, that's a hard thing to do. Drafting and developing good pitching and then making them even better is a very difficult thing to do. But you're right, the Mariners have done a great job of that. George Kirby is really good. He's got 6 walks and 51 strikeouts this year. To be this young and throw this many strikes is very rare, and he's a very good pitcher now. He's going to be a great pitcher before he's done. And I know Bryce Miller got pounded the other night, but he's got 3 walks, 31 strikeouts, and it's been exceptional so far. So this is the future of the Mariners, is developing these young pitchers, getting them to the big leagues as quickly as possible. But again, they're going to have to get supported by a few more runs. Otherwise, great pitching isn't going to be enough.
Tim, how common is it that a team's success, either at the plate or as a pitching staff, is impacted by their park? It's a conversation that's been happening quite a bit here in Seattle when people were trying to think of, why the sluggish start for this offense. I think people were looking at T-Mobile and the weather. Do those end up being as big of factors as we think they can, or do you think that that's saying too much?
No, I think park factors are real. That's a big ballpark. It's a difficult park in which to hit, especially especially early in the season. But that will turn if you swing the bat better than they have to this point. I don't think it should be used as an excuse. Oh, our park's too big, we can't score runs here. You're going to stop the other team from scoring runs there also. So, yeah, it's part of it. Park factor is real, and sometimes it affects the Mariners.
That's part of the argument we hear. Stacey and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out why the Mariners haven't made didn't make a move this offseason, a bigger move this offseason when it comes to a bat. And people say, well, hitters don't want to come here because of the ballpark and the weather or whatnot. What's your assessment? What do you think it is? Why don't you think the Mariners make these moves? And is it as simple as people just don't want to come play here?
Well, I love Seattle. I think a lot of people would love to play there. But I'll never forget that Eduardo Perez, former major leaguer, former Mariner, my teammate at ESPN, he's told me multiple times how difficult it is to play for the Mariners because they're so far out there. They're so detached from the rest of the major league teams. He said there are no short road trips for the Mariners. Every trip is a long trip. And when you take a cross-country flight, that really wears you out coming and going. And I thought, that's too much of an excuse. And Eduardo said, look, I was there. I promise you, when you have a travel day and it takes the entire day to do it, that eventually comes back to get you. Now, if you have good enough players, that's not going to come back and get you. But it does factor in, according to certain people, including my dear friend Eduardo Perez.
It's really, really interesting hearing that mentality and that perspective, because as Bump's a former football player, I don't have any professional athletic background, but we always do the same thing where we're like, is this just people kind of making excuses, or is there reality to it? It's always interesting to hear, like, no, I know someone who experienced that, and you wouldn't think it adds up, but it does. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of miles over the course of a season. All right. Well, my last question for you, Tim, is outside of the Rangers, we're taking a look around the rest of the American League to figure out, who are we starting to watch here as we head into summer and try to make sure the Mariners can stay in this thing. Are there any other surprise teams pushing for playoffs, I guess, in either league that are surprising you?
Well, the Mariners should be concerned because we've been over the AL West, how much better it is. I wouldn't worry about the Central. Only one team's coming out of there. But the bigger issue for the Mariners is the AL East, because all five of those teams are over 500. All five of those teams have a plus run differential. All five of those teams are good enough to make the playoffs, even though I don't think the Red Sox are going to make it. There's a chance, an outside chance, that four teams from the AL East could make the playoffs. And that's because the Orioles are for real also, even more for real than the Rangers are. The Blue Jays have struggled lately, but they're pretty darn good too. The Rays have been the best team in baseball from day one this season, and the Yankees are rolling now, and I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. So when you count up four American League East teams, and then you add in, of course, one Central team, and then you have the Rangers and the Astros in the West, there's not enough room for the Mariners in the playoffs unless they get it going and outplay one of these teams. It's going to be a difficult road, but I repeat, I like the Mariners. I think their pitching is going to be good enough to get them in the playoffs, but they've got some work to do.
We're going to kick the door down. We're going to try to get in this thing, Tim.
That's right.
Real quick last one. Do we have enough? As this roster stands right now, do you think the Mariners have enough to make a run and a push?
I do, but this is where GMs earn all of their money when they get close to the trade deadline, where they have to make that decision. Are we in? Are we out? Are we going to be willing to sacrifice, some of our future to get somebody that can get us in the playoffs now? I think the Mariners will do that if the right person comes along. But I must tell you, I'm not sure there's a whole lot of help out there right now in the trade market, like a hitter that's going to come in and change the fortunes of the Mariners. I'm not sure there's a pitcher out there, maybe Julio Rodriguez of the Tigers, who just went on the injured list, that's going to make a big difference. So it may be smaller moves, but I fully expect the Mariners to be aggressive at the trade deadline, because they can't tease their fans and make it 1 year for the first time in 21 years, and then, not make it again for a few years. I like what they're doing, and I think they'll be aggressive at the deadline.
One of the best voices in baseball. He is ESPN's Tim Kurkjian. Tim, thank you so much for taking the time. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure. Thank you.